page 125. Love and understanding of God. He who clearly and distinctly understands himself and his emotions loves God, and so much the more in proportion as he more understands himself and his emotions. This love towards God must hold the chief place in the mind. God is without passions, neither is he affected by any emotion of pleasure or pain. God does not love or hate anyone. He who loves God cannot endeavor that God should love him in return. Love toward God cannot be sustained by the emotion of envy or jealousy. Contrariwise, it is the more fostered in proportion as we conceive a greater number of men to be joined by God by the same bond of love. The more we understand particular things, the more do we understand God. Things are conceived by us as actual in two ways, either in existing in relation to a given time and place, or as contained in God and following from the necessity of the divine nature. Whatsoever we conceive in this second way as true or real, we conceive under the form of eternity, and their ideas involve the eternal and the infinite essence of God. Our mind, insofar as it knows itself and the body under the form of eternity, has to that extent necessarily a knowledge of God, and knows that it is in God, and is conceived through God. The highest endeavor of the mind and the highest virtue is to understand things by the third kind of knowledge, that is, by intuition. In proportion as the mind is more capable of understanding things by the third kind of knowledge, it deserves more to understand things by that kind. From this third kind of knowledge arises the highest possible mental acquiescence. Whatsoever we understand by the third kind of knowledge that we take delight in, and our delight is accompanied by the idea of God as cause. From the third kind of knowledge necessarily arises the intellectual love of God. From this kind of knowledge arises pleasure accompanied by the idea of God as cause, that is, the love of God, not insofar as we imagine him as present, but insofar as we understand him to be external. This is what I call the intellectual love of God. God loves himself with an infinite intellectual love. The intellectual love of the mind toward God is part of the infinite love wherewith God loves himself. In proportion as each thing possesses more of perfection, so is it more active and less passive, and vice versa. In proportion as it is more active, so is it more perfect. Blessedness is not the reward of virtue, but virtue itself. Neither do we rejoice therein because we control our lusts, but contrariwise, because we rejoice therein, we are able to control our lusts. Epilogue, page 128. I have thus completed all I wish to set forth touching the mind's power over the emotions and the mind's freedom, whence it appears how potent is the wise man, and how much he surpasses the ignorant man, who is driven only by his lusts. For the ignorant man is not only distracted in various ways by external causes without ever gaining the true acquiescence of his spirit, but moreover lives as it were unwitting of himself, and of God, and of things, and as soon as he ceases to suffer, ceases also to be. Whereas the wise man, insofar as he is regarded as such, is scarcely at all disturbed in spirit, but being conscious of himself and of God and of things by a certain eternal necessity, never ceases to be, but always possesses true acquiescence of his spirit. If the way which I have pointed out as leading to this result seems exceedingly hard, it may nevertheless be discovered. Needs must it be hard, since it is so seldom found. How would it be possible, if salvation were ready to our hand, and could without great labor be found, that it should be by almost all men neglected? But all things excellent are as difficult as they are rare. The end of a premier reprint, 128.